So,
Yeah.
like,
Oh, the album release.
yeah. That was what that was for. I said, yeah, we'll definitely be there.
Oh man, that was a great night. And I love my band so much because they stood with me when I told them that we were going to learn All My Life by Casey and JoJo. I said, we're going to learn it and it's going to sound great.
Really?
And so that ended up being the closing song that both nights.
Oh, y'all just learned that?
We had just.
Okay, look, that was great. That was great.
It was
That
the
was
best,
great.
but
And
it
just
was-
for them
it
to
was
learn
so
that and
fun.
unexpected. Like, I was like, okay.
It was so fun.
I was like, I know
It was
this one.
Well, I had 9 singers with me.
Yes.
I was like, I can't do this song by myself. Like, this is not a by myself. We can't ever justify doing this again and me not losing my voice the way that, it would happen. And so all them singers, I'm like, Jack, shout out to Jack Freeman and Zamaji. I'm like, I need y'all to be Casey on every empty part. So anytime you hear an empty space, that's your time to do in there.
Knocked it out. Jack Freeman, friend of the show.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, Jack.
I love all of them. Man, they're just
So how do you-
amazing.
How do you even meet the Suffers?
How did I meet them?
Or were y'all the Suffers when y'all met?
We were
was
not
it
the
any-
Suffers when we
yeah.
met because, I really do believe in God putting you in positions that you're supposed to eventually end up in. And if you don't believe in God, I believe in the universe doing that for you. I first met the first sector of the band when I was skipping school in high school to gig. And my senior year of high school was so wild because the choral teachers that I was getting into it with just didn't understand that I had made a decision. I was like, I'm going to be a rock and roll singer. I'm going to be a Tina Turner. I'm going to get out this bitch and I'm not going to talk to y'all no more.
Okay.
And they were just like, that's not how this works. I said, I read what is required of me to graduate. I missed a stipulation because they had changed the rule to where if I missed too many days of school, so I wasn't allowed to walk.
They'll catch you on that one. They'll catch you on that one every
something like
time.
60-something days, but whatever.
Just
Whatever.
a little bit. Just a little bit.
But you know what? Almost every single person, including the Tauntauns, who I met at that same time, that I worked with back then, I eventually worked with later on in my career. And during that time, that's when I initially met members of Los Carnales. And Los Carnales is one of those bands that has been around forever in Houston. For folks that are not familiar, they're a punk ska band that does a lot of the music in Spanish, but they incorporate reggae and jazz and rock and roll, and it's just a really fun time. But they would let me sit in. And to be able to sit in with bands that had that kind of a draw locally meant so much to me because back in the day when I was little, now we are way more aware of what we let kids watch and what we don't let them watch. But I grew up in the generation of you don't know what the hell I watched because you left the VHS tapes there. And so my favorite videos that we had when I was a kid, even though I was like way too young to be watching them, was What's Love Got to Do with It and The 5 Heartbeats. And I watched them maybe once, twice a day. And I more so watched because I was convinced that they were giving me a formula.
Okay.
And they did.
They did. Yeah,
They
absolutely.
did. Robert Townsend gave me a formula.
Yeah.
Tina Turner gave me a formula. I was convinced, and anybody that's seen What's Love Got to Do with It, I was like, I want to learn how to sing like every man that can sing for longer than 2 hours. And Felipe was the first dude that I met in Houston that was playing 2-hour shows with Los Carnales. And his show was just very well put together.
Yeah.
Different suit every time.
Yeah.
Very dramatic introductions, just everything, And I'm like, okay, presentation. And then for me, I felt this pressure once Destiny's Child took off, which to an average person that sounds crazy. Like, why you feel pressure when Destiny's Child takes off?
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I'm a singer. I'm from Houston. Brandy and Monica popped off at 14 or
I feel
15.
that.
Yeah.
I'm 12. I'm like,
Oh, so you're
man.
like, I'm already
I'm like,
behind
what
the ball.
is this? No. You know, like, they know Wyclef. Fuck, I'm
Back
behind.
then, yeah, golly.
Because I'm crazy. But,
Yeah.
you know, some might say crazy, some might say innovative. I don't know. But the thing is that it was an expectation that I had in my mind that I was behind because I had no one around telling me there's no timetable on when success occurs.
No.
And I had no one telling me that when it's your time yet. And so I'm over here trying to tell my mom I got to move to LA, you know, and she's like, if you don't take your ID to move to LA,
Yeah.
but back to your room and whatever, because I think I was 12. So that wasn't happening. But years later, when I was in high school and I read all these books and I've watched all these films about how to make this work. And at that time, MTV Diary, which I wished so badly they would bring back because that was like the pinnacle of me being in high school and watching, you know, not just Destiny's Child, but Britney Spears and J-Lo and Usher talk about how hard the road was, how they needed to take care of themselves. I'm at home writing down notes. Okay. All right. Because I know I'm about to be on the road.
Yeah.
I'm going. My mom don't get it. It's like, I don't have the music yet. So I was writing every day because I knew it was coming. Because the only consistent thing that I heard back then was, you can't prepare yourself for the wave. Once it comes, you gone.
Just ride it or you
They
don't.
did, yeah.
Yeah.
All of them have that in common.
Yeah. And so even now, like, I try to make sure that I'm always focused, maybe not so much because it can be very consuming. But at the same time, when I'm creating at a mass rate or if I'm finishing tasks like back to back, I bask in it because I look at it all as a gift. Because I know some people are not that organized. Some people are not that productive. Some people don't get those ideas like that. And I just look at it as, damn, like these are all these blessings that I used to ask for. Because I had years where the songs weren't coming like that. I had songs where I didn't understand why I wasn't getting to where I needed to be, or not songs, years where I didn't understand why I wasn't getting to where I used to be, years where I had to learn to support all of my friends because feeling left out, feeling jealous, feeling whatever, like that's not productive because that's not for you. Now, if there are certain things, achievements that you want to attain, there are ways to figure it out.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's not what you think that's holding you back, that's actually holding you back. And so like one thing that I had to like really, really work on recently, and this has been like I'd say a work in progress over the last 3 years, is trusting and knowing that those little parts of all those films where you have those little snakes, that they don't win. They never win in any of those movies. They never win. When the artist continues to keep going. When you stop, they always win. You see them with the stacks, and it would be so easy to quit sometimes. Yeah. But every year that I don't quit, every time I write another song, every time I make it through a part of a production or an idea or whatever, a collaboration that might have been a little tough, I'm just like, fuck yes, I did it again, bitch. You know, like it's such small victories sometimes because when you're comparing yourself to Mount Everest, that's what I call Beyonce now. You know, I call any artist
Everest,
that has made it to a peak where you can control everything without worry about the budget. That's what I call Everest.
Oh, yeah.
Now, when you talk to them, I'm sure that they have the things that they're trying to excel to. And so in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to compare myself to any artist because no artist has been everywhere that I've been, and their journey is their journey. You know what? Maybe there's certain things that I want for myself in a different kind of way. Like I need to figure out how I want that. So one big thing that I've been focused on recently is I want to participate in more symposiums. I want to do more long form speaking engagements. I want to do more applications for big grants so that I can do the larger art projects and music performance pieces that I have in my vault that are just there rather than depending on money that's never going to come from just my own just sitting on my ass.
Yeah.
So it's like, if there's a grant out there waiting for an idea that I think is that good, why don't I propose it to someone that's actually asking to hear about that rather than to someone that's just going to shit on me and my ideas?
Yeah.
And so once I started seeking out people that weren't only like-minded, but like-minded and deep with pockets to help fulfill these visions that I had, because that's not the type of people that they are. There are people out there that all they do is make money and they want to contribute to artists.
Yeah.
They want to contribute to that. But because people are so focused on the wrong shit, we forget that that's a generational wealth that does that type of philanthropy, that's never going to go away either.
No.
Yeah.
But it's just finding those people, making those relationships, and keeping it moving.
Now, how do you maintain, like we're talking about, like you said, y'all are a band, y'all are a huge band. Y'all seem to have a pretty distinct, I don't want to say distinct, y'all move as a band, y'all move as a team. That's a lot of people to kind of get in line.
Yeah.
How do y'all make that? I mean, it's a lot. I mean, guys, when we tell y'all it's a lot of it, y'all are a band. Like, y'all are a full-on band. It's not just like,
not five
there's
people.
four. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
how many people are in the Suffers?
So
like the Wu-Tang.
Yeah.
When we started, there were 10 people. There are 7 people now, full-time, 6 of the original members. We just had another woman join recently, Juliet Terrell, on bass, who's incredible. However, to answer your question, I feel that being in a band, any size band, be it a band of 2 or more, takes just as much work as a healthy relationship. So, and it takes just as much wrangling and work and love as if you were to go on a family trip with like 6 cousins. And I know that some people don't have families that big. Some people have families that are bigger than that, like me. My first cousins growing up, I think there were, I don't even know how many, I think 15 of us. So when we all got together, it was like gang, 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 you know, like I've just, that's my first band was 9 people.
Yeah.
The smallest band I've ever been in was 4 people. And that was, it was very light. But at the same time, I always missed the other elements. And I grew up in a house where we listened to big band music. So your Earth, Wind, and Fire,
Okay.
Shaka Khan, and
No wonder.
Rufus. But beyond that, traditional jazz. And it was just what I loved. And again, watching all those movies, and then when having the Temptations biopic come out, you know, that became a part of the same like cycle.
Yeah.
And no matter how long it was, I'm watching it, trying to figure all this stuff out and figure out like, okay, I got to make sure that if I start trying to mess around with a little bit of some, you know, DRUGS, I need to make sure that I keep my shit together.
That's true.
Because you can't do that and
Yeah.
maintain a career.
Yeah.
And if you do, you better be careful. Like, that's not for me. So I learned I can do some weed, I can do a little mushrooms every now and then, and talk to Jesus and drink water. Like that's my happy lane.
That's as far out as you
That's
go.
that.
Yeah.
But that's my personal
Yeah.
limit. For us to maintain as a unit, we have to talk to each other. We have to hang out with each other. We have to follow up with hanging out on each other, with each other, on each other, whatever. And doing it all the time and making sure that it's consistent.
Yeah.
I tell folks that because we've been together so long, June makes 9 years of the Suffers.
Yeah.
When we're not around each other for long periods of time, we get sad. And the funny thing is that it's the other way around too. If we're gone too long from home, we get bummed out. So it's like you got to find that medium that makes sense. One of my first mentors when I first started touring told me, you can't be on the road that long. And I said, what do you mean I can't be on the road that long? I feel great. And his name is Jim James, and he sings for this band called My Morning Jacket. And they've been touring forever, like 20-something years.
Yeah.
My Morning
And
Jacket.
he
of
tells
course.
me, he
And
says,
they're
I
on
know
the
you
road.
feel, he's like, I know you feel good right now, but after 6 months of doing this, you'll be lucky if y'all are still together. And so 6 months later, we only lost one person. So, but no, actually, I spoke to my agent immediately after having that conversation with him. And by the end of the summer, I was ran ragged. I was just like, oh my God, we made it through, but why did we do this? So to give people perspective, and you can look at our first, 2015, our first year of touring, the routing was insane.
Y'all went everywhere.
Everywhere and in directions that didn't make any sense for us to get to Newport Folk Festival, and they were all important gigs.
Yeah.
And there's all once you get on the wave, they're all important.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So I remember we started in Boise, Idaho, drove to Pemberton Festival, which was north of Vancouver. So that's like 10 hours. And you're crossing the Canadian border, and on the west side of Canada, they just fuck with you a little more, especially if you're a musician. Everybody knows that. And so you add another 2 hours to that, then you come back in. We had to play a show in Jackson, Idaho, I think. Not Jackson, Victor, Idaho, which was about 2 hours north of Salt Lake City. Drove to Salt Lake immediately after the show. Flew to Newport Folk Festival to make it that next day. We're thinking everything's groovy, everything's fine. Newport Folk Festival is in Newport, Rhode Island, by the way. And then our keyboard player breaks his arm because he falls downstairs that morning. And then we had to play the rest of that tour without him. And, it was one of these things that when I think back, I'm like,
how did it happen?
Yeah.
How did it happen? How did we do this? But at the same time, it's like being able to do this is such a gift, but you don't want to abuse it.
Yeah.
You don't want to abuse, and that includes abusing yourself. And like right now, we're working on this record, and it's been work in a way that we've never worked before. Last year, the two founding members of the band left the band for different reasons. Everybody's still Gucci, but as we've moved on to working on this new album, we've had to get to know what we sound like without them.
Really?
And so it's been a very fun and exploratory time because we sound great.
That's good.
And that's not to say that we sound great because they're not in the band. That's not what I'm saying. But I feel like they did such a great job of building a legacy of sound to where us moving on now, you're not going to lose that. It's just we have this in our toolkit now, and now we're bringing all this other shit in to put into the box too. So it's been such a fun time working on this record, but I get really bad when I'm working on albums to where I don't like to leave the house. And I don't my friends try to hang. I'm like, I don't want to. I want to finish this, but then I have to be realistic and know that like I can't finish the album in a day. So it's been work for me to just get out the house the last 2 weeks, and because right now we just finished recording a chunk of songs, and so before I get ready to do the background vocal sessions, I'm working on all of the arrangements for that right now, and so.
That's work.
It's work, and I'm so particular with how I like things to be, and
Arrangement is key.
Yeah, and I'm very proud of the arrangement. It's just I want to make sure that the singers, when I bring them in, just feel empowered to just be ready to go.
Okay.
And so I've been making it complicated and fun, but to where when we learn it, it's not going to be as painful as it was for me to create it.
That's good, though.
Now, when did you start to feel like, when we're going back, because now you guys are working on this album, you had a lot of success with the last album. When did you guys start to feel like, okay, this Suffers thing is like, this is working? Like, this is, like, what was the first moment where you're like, all right?
Ooh, I would say after the first tour, like once we survived the first tour.
So it was the whole first tour. You're
really?
still like,
I kept feeling like, Well, I mean, the band was doing fine as a
Yeah,
band,
yeah.
but I didn't know if we would be able to hang because so many people told me we wouldn't. So when you have a whole group of folks telling you what you can't do, you know, it's really hard to go against the grain and push through to do it. Yeah, you gonna go into it, all them niggas, and I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, Aretha, you know, did it.
I mean, it's
Etta
incredible
did it.
because,
all these other people did it. Like, what makes me?
but that is the thing. That's probably the number. You know, like how they
so
even
many.
get paid. There's so many people, and there's da 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 da. But it's like we come from a not we, like I'm not a singer, but the big band thing is not a new thing. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the stars that we really like that are like these classic legendary artists, like they toured with the band. And so you look at James Brown, or you look at these people that's like, not only they tour with band, people from the band would leave and make their own iconic bands and then come back in and out.
Shout out to Fred Wesley.
Yes. So it's like, that's one of those things, but like, how is that now? Because that's not necessarily the music model nowadays. Like, it's a new model where it's just like, hey, I like to record in my living room, drop the album, be out, done. Like, that's it. And the money's not there, and da 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 da. And it's like, you guys are doing something that's a whole lot different, and it's working.
A lot can happen when you stop talking to people that haven't gone where you're trying to go. The first person, and it's that same year, the first person that I remember speaking to that had done what we do, that gave us really useful advice, was Lionel Richie. We opened for him in Austin a few years ago, and he said, don't let anybody break y'all up. He's like, he's like, they're going to try to make you go solo. They're going to try to get rid of the band, the horns, replace
Listen
the
to
horns.
Lionel, like,
And
Wasn't he in the Commodores?
Hey, man, never mind. I don't like that, but he's like, don't make my mistakes, man.
Yeah.
Well, he talked about how before the Commodores, how they were trying to kick him out the band.
Really?
He said before the Commodores broke, they were trying to kick everybody out the band for different, whatever the label could do to make it smaller. That's what they wanted to do.
That's ridiculous.
And he said that, I know it might not make sense some days, but if y'all can figure this out, you'll be just fine. And so I'm like, who the hell am I to not listen to the man that owns half of Rodeo Drive?
That's true.
I was about
You
to
know?
say.
Yeah.
So, sometimes it is crazy. Sometimes it is hard. Sometimes it's everything and then some. But then I think about all the other things that I've read or heard about that were hard and how they turned out. And then I'm like, girl, if you don't get back to work, and I'm like, let me smoke a joint, eat a cookie, and go back to work. Because sometimes you just need to hear yourself complain for a second.
Yeah.
And then get back to work. Because every time I just do the work, everything turns out fine. When I complain, or I'm on Instagram and I get into one of the wormholes people be allowing themselves to get into, it's like those are 3 hours that I could have spent working on my creative resume. Those are 3 hours that I could have spent working on a grand idea. Those are 3 hours that I could have spent, working on myself, working out, singing, whatever. But here I am trying to compare myself to if an algorithm that's being forced into my face.
Yeah.
Then I had to realize, oh, this is being pushed to me because I'm successful too, because I work hard too.
Yeah.
So if I work on my content, if that's what I want to showcase, cool, do that. Or build a vault, and then when you're ready to really, really do this, it's just boom, ready to go, boom, ready to go, boom, ready to go. And I don't feel so freaking stressed out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, that's dope.
Figured it out.
That's some great advice.
I haven't figured it out, but I'm figuring it out.
Yeah. I mean, you do have those keys to success, and you follow them.
I mean, these are all basic things. It's just working hard, sticking with it.
Staying around positive people.
Staying around positive people, not being afraid to fail. Working on my own personal attitude.
Yeah.
And acknowledging that as a leader, sometimes you're not right. Sometimes you're the dumbest person in the room. But if you're the right leader, that means everyone around you is smarter and better, and or trying to get better and trying to encourage you to be better every day. And like it's something I talk about with my management team all the time, who they also manage Tank and the Bangas and Big Frida, and it's just positive energy all the time, and it's always okay. Tomorrow we're gonna do better. Every day we're gonna get better. Every day we're gonna do better. And in my brain, I'm like, why not? You know, if it's up to me to make a decision to do better, okay, great. You know, and when I think back on a lot of the songs that really inspired me to do that, I'm like, dang. Now I am in a position to empower someone else to do that in my music. And so like every time I think about encouraging songs, I always think about that Nas song, that I Know I Can, and how much it used to play on the radio. But it was hitting me like that. I'm like, yep, here I go. Here I go. You know, same thing with when Carter 2 came out, Hustler music, every single day. My boyfriend at the time was that in the morning, belly at night, every day. But at the same time, you know, every time
Belly at night.
Oh God, I sold my soul to the devil.
Oh my
gosh. Oh man.
It was
Oh
cold on
God,
this
I
level.
can't.